Welcome back to Normal Island. I'm Curtis Daly. It's the weekend and the weather has been a lot better. Well, in Leeds anyway. And because it's Friday, it means I'm joined by the fantastic Sarah Delau. Sarah, how are we doing this evening?
Yes, good, thank you. Glad it's Friday. We've made it for another week. Yay. But
We
yeah,
did,
good, thank you. How
yeah.
are you?
I'm very well. I want to know, tell me more about what transpired today. You had a little football match, didn't you?
I did. Yeah, so guys, as I don't know if you know, but I'm basically semi-pro, and I do it for free. I played a charity football match today, and willingly, for the good of the people watching, subbed myself off. And I'm glad I did, because then we started winning. I think we were losing 2-0 initially, and then I came off and then we started winning. So I think I'm the problem. It's me.
Did you? You didn't get any red cards, did you?
No,
A bit
honestly, every
of an
time
animal on the
someone
pitch.
approached me, I was just like, "Get away from me right now! I cannot afford a broken bone."
Okay, now coming up on tonight's show, we have really interesting stories. Right wingers cry over adolescence. Landlords have overrun the economy. And Gary Stevenson gives a masterclass on a diary of a CEO podcast. As always, remember to like the stream. And if you're not a subscriber, then please hit that button. We'd really like to get to 20,000, so please help us get there. We'll also be getting to your comments at the end of the show. So make sure you are very, very busy in the chat. Now, on to our first story. Netflix's new show Adolescence, starring Owen Cooper and Stephen Graham, looks at young male violence. It has been praised all round through its depiction of a society which pushes men to extremely violent behaviour, including murder. It follows the story of a 15-year-old boy, Jamie Miller, played by Cooper, who is accused of stabbing a young girl to death. It's a social commentary which asks us to reflect on what roles we play in society.
She might like me. It's clever, don't you think?
To ask her out when everyone else didn't like her.
Well, I went round and said I was sorry and everything. That fidget was a wanker. And I said I took her to the fair she liked.
Her weakness made her more gettable, was your theory?
Yeah.
I thought you said you didn't like her.
No, she's flat, that's fact, but I didn't mind that. That's okay. I wore my best tracksuit I can find, and I don't even know why I'm telling you all this, but I just said, you want to come to the fair?
And what did she say?
She just laughed and said, oh, I'm not that desperate.
And the emoji messages came after that?
Yeah.
She was, let's say, attacking you for presuming you could ask her out.
Your words.
Do you think they're unfair?
You think she's a bitch, right? Doing all that. You think she's a bullying bitch. She was a bullying bitch, right? That's the thing, you see. That night, I didn't touch her. I could have touched her, but I didn't. I had a knife. She was scared, but I didn't do that. I could have touched any part of her body I wanted to. I really wanted to, but I didn't. Most boys would have touched her.
You notice there's not a single cut in that scene because I'm sure a lot of you already know. Every episode is seamlessly filmed, so it's all done in one take, which would have been painstakingly hard to make, but incredible stuff. So this has wide acclaim, but of course there are some who are outraged at the show. And no, you won't be, you won't be, can't bloody speak, you won't be surprised that it comes from the right wing, so much so that GB News decided to make a commentary on the show, accusing the producers of attacking an easy target, white people.
Are working class white men and boys always the easy target? Adolescence is the box office Netflix series that's got everyone talking. Now, it covers the harrowing story of a seemingly normal young lad who brutally kills a girl. Online radicalisation, incel culture, violence against women, these are all very real problems. But my concern is this. Will this perpetuate a narrative that the biggest problem in society and the biggest threat posed to women and girls comes from working-class white boys? Does it run the risk of demonising them? They are already told to check their privilege. They're already told that people who look like them are responsible for all of the world's evils. They're already the worst performing at school. It is always easier for celebrities and politicians to jump on a bandwagon if the problem is seen to be white Brits. Now, obviously, there are loads of documentaries and dramas on gang culture, but how many of them really get stuck into the issue of fatherlessness amongst the black community? How long will it be before Netflix commissions a series on the misogyny, backward and sexually violent attitudes towards women held by some people who have just entered Britain illegally from parts of the Middle East?
Honestly, they should name GB News the Karen News Network, since they're constantly outraged and they accuse everything of being woke. Sarah, while most people who've seen the show have praised it, the right wing have turned this into another anti-woke scandal. What do you make of this outrage, and what do you make of that clip from GB News?
I mean, of course they have. This is what they always do. A knee-jerk reaction to anything that they don't like is always classified as woke, because it challenges their carefully constructed narratives that don't suit their biases. And if they actually interrogated, I bet the people who watch GB News, etc., even that clip from GB News, I bet that show hasn't even been watched by them, because what it actually is exposing is a broader issue when it comes to misogyny, that it is essentially this pipeline into legitimate violence that starts to ensue. And this isn't about an honest critique of adolescence or even a genuine concern about representation. It's about controlling the narrative. The right-wing media ecosystem, like GB News, to the likes of Rob Schneider's, Twitter feed, which I know that you'll bring up in a second, but it's spent the last decade basically perfecting this strategy, like slap the word woke on anything that you don't like, and outrage will ensue to shut down that conversation. But I even want them to unpack what woke actually means to them, because I feel like it's just this, let's just slap it on anything that we consider somewhat left leaning and have that conversation be completely shut up. But I don't know, that I'm having huge issues with the fact that they aren't even interrogating the fact that 10%, no, not even, I can't remember the statistics. This is an actual statistic, though, that kids as young as 8 are exposed to really, really heinous things on the internet, pornography being one of them. And they fail to even interrogate that because it threatens their worldview. This isn't a matter of white, black, brown, whatever. This is something that's actually impacting our young people. And what are you going to do about it? So why does adolescence trigger them? Because it tells a story that they don't want told, to be honest. And I think that's what's triggered their conversation.
Yeah. And thing is, like, the presenter there, I forget his name, he says that he's trying to bring this down racial lines. The show itself doesn't talk about race. It's not about racial lines. It is actually about gender lines. It's about men. And that's maybe an uncomfortable conversation we should have, that there's an issue with male violence. And that transcends political, it transcends cultural and racial lines. There's a problem with male violence in this country, and there's a problem with male violence in Muslim majority countries or in Europe. It doesn't matter where it is. So I think this is trying to cover up gendered violence by saying, actually, it's more to do with race. And I do find it funny as well. And he admitted it himself. He says, okay, there has been a lot of TV and film documentaries and artwork on gangs, but not about absent fathers. And I wanted to sort of pick that bit out because, first of all, he admits that, yes, this isn't something we treat as taboo. I mean, we talk about black and black violence a lot. And, I mean, has he not seen The Wire? Which is an excellent TV show, by the way.
Yeah.
It's we always talk about.
But the thing is, though, these are systemic issues that they don't want to talk about. But what's even interesting is that they will want to use the verbiage of black on black crime, like, and then when it comes to a white person doing crime towards another white person, it's never called white on white crime; it's just called crime. So it's like they are constantly trying to cause these divisions between people by consistently categorizing every single person that they see. I'm not saying we need to live in a colorblind world, but they pick and choose when they want to engage with identity politics, and this is one of those instances. They and it kind of, like you said, it's a broader issue. This is interrogating the fact that the National Police Chiefs Council has declared it's an endemic in the UK, that that violence against women and girls is a problem, that it's an endemic, it's a national emergency, and it requires our immediate attention. And yet they've kind of twisted it into this, but white working class boys, like, how are you painting them to be these menaces of society, when abuse, misogyny, sexism are all systemic issues that need all of our energy, all of our attention, and needs us to collaboratively work together to kind of dismantle that. But I don't know. I think, as you pointed out, like, the right is mad that the show didn't cast this black or brown kid as the role of the perpetrator, and that kind of tells you everything. Like, they're not upset about young people being unfairly depicted. They're upset that their racial narrative isn't where knife crime is a problem of black youth isn't being addressed in the way that they want it to be. Like, it's just not confirming their biases. So huge issues that they need to address.
I mean, I'm currently reading Ash Sarkar's book Minority Rule, and in the book, and she's made it on interviews as well, it's a really good point about how the right wing have adopted the white working class line, right? These same people 10 years ago were calling them chavs, but now they have shifted to concern trolling, and that they are the ones that care about the white working class, whilst the left hate them, and we're apparently only worried about immigrants and people of colour. Now, there has also been a lot of extremely racist framing online, comparing the casting of a young white boy to apparently the reality. It's spread so far that actor Rob Schneider, who has basically become a right-wing talking head instead of acting, well, he posted this.
Every generation pretends gang crime is a new problem. So when you look at the press reports they cite in their scholarship...
That's the tweet there. Now, the show didn't use any specific stories, okay? Some people are trying to pretend that it's based on the story that just race swapped. That's not true, okay? So the reason it being wokeness is categorically a lie. But because the weapon used in the show was a knife, these people are outraged that they didn't cast a person of colour. And that's why you saw that 2-second clip of Akala. We're going to play it in a second, but I thought it was useful to play this clip of Akala on Channel 4 explaining how race has been weaponized on knife crime.
Every generation pretends gang crime is a new problem. So when you look at the press reports they cite in their scholarship, it's this same sort of sense of moral panic, this unprecedented thing. When actually we've had violent teenage youth gangs for 150, 200 years, maybe even longer. And the social indicators of that violence have remained identical for almost 200 years, as have the sort of facile explanations of...
And those social indicators are?
Poverty, domestic abuse, lack of education, so expulsion from school. So, for example, almost half the people in prison today in Britain were expelled from school as children, versus just 1% in the population as a whole. Among young people, about half the young people in young offenders institutes were at some point in care growing up, versus about 1% in the population as a whole. So social indicators have remained identical. Explanations, or what we call moral panics, this sort of idea that just having enough police or just having tougher sentences will work. A good friend of mine, Dr. Baz Dreisinger, did a PhD looking at prisons all around the world, and she didn't find any correlation anywhere between tougher sentences and reduction of crime.
So those people who analyse it as a race problem,
yeah,
these are black gangs, these are Asian gangs, these are...
This is fascinating. I mean, let's just look at the maths. There are 1.2 million black people in London. In a bad year, 50 of them will kill someone. That's less than 0.004% of the black population. Therefore, anyone that thinks that blackness is a sufficient common denominator for violent crime clearly doesn't even understand what a common denominator is. Just to contrast, in a bad year in Glasgow, say 2005, there were 40 murders. There were only 600,000 people in Glasgow. So that year, a Glaswegian as a whole was twice as likely to be killed as a black Londoner. Whereas the commonalities, when you actually look at the demography of violent crime, the commonalities remain the same in Glasgow, Liverpool, Belfast, Naples, or London. Racial explanations are sort of way out for the powers that be, a way out for the wider society. And it's revealing that what happens in London is black on black crime, even when the person committing it is like me, has one white parent, one black parent. Okay, what happens in Glasgow, race is not important.
So what Accolade touches upon there, and I want to directly bring that back to, is it Patrick Christie, I think it's the presenter, who said that there's not enough documentaries talking about fatherless figures in black families. And this is where obviously the right get it wrong and weaponize it, and it's where liberals get it wrong. Accolade's talking about class, okay? It's not just absentee fathers. It's not just being on social media, the aspects of it, but it's austerity. It's closing down community centres. It's lack of opportunity. And simply saying we need to change the culture, which we obviously do, won't be enough. Sarah, I think it's pretty clear that the reaction of this show from the right wing about how a white young boy was failed by society and their response is to trash it completely exposes these people as absolute grifters, and that they do not give a flying fuck about any young person, any young white person.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's why Adolescence triggers them, right? Because it tells a story that they don't want told. It literally tells them that young white working class boys are victims of this system that they keep backing, essentially. Like, the right-wing media relies so heavily on a strict racial hierarchy when discussing crime and violence, particularly. So when a young black or brown kid commits a crime, they would frame it as some sort of cultural failure, blaming, like you said, absent fathers, rap music. We've seen the silencing of those within the music genre, where they say, oh, well, listen, the rap music is inciting violence, let's silence them. Or immigration as well. But then when a white kid is violent, they either ignore it or reframe it as some sort of isolated incident. Now, with this program in particular, it disrupts that. It says, well, it kind of forces us to ask, what drives young men, particularly regardless of race, towards violence, and what systemic failures have created those conditions, what systemic failures have created those structures. And like you said, it is decades and decades of austerity that has been pushed by right-wing governments, and it's played quite a significant role in that. The cuts in youth services, the cuts in community centres, the poverty, the socioeconomic deprivation, the access to education, like all of these things contribute to the failures that we're seeing at the moment. So instead of engaging with that, they pivot. And the claim that the show is anti-white, that it unfairly depicts white working class boys as these villains, or as violent, I think is absolutely absurd, especially considering how much right-wing media has spent years demonizing those same communities. So they pick and choose. There's a lot of irony to unpack there. I
want to throw another wrinkle into this as well, which is that when you compare violence between maybe young black men and young white men, which is that if it's a white kid, they'll ignore it or make up some kind of story. There's also another element, which is that, and I'm not blaming Adolescence in any way, but it's part of the trap, which is that if a young white kid does something, a lot of people do go, well, that's society's fault. What are we going to do? What roles do we play? Which is the right questions we should be asking, right? But if it's a young black kid, say Rudy Cabana, no one will go, okay, well, what sort of society have we created where young people are committing violence? We go, no, it's obviously to do with their race, it's to do with their culture, it's to do with immigration. So even with that, we're not given equal parity. Now, this doesn't excuse any of the crimes. If you're a young white kid that stabs and kills someone, or you're a young black kid that kills and stabs someone, it doesn't excuse that. But I do think that there's something very wrong with society when young people are doing such heinous crimes. I just ask for equal parity. And we're asking the right questions when it's a story about a young white kid. But if it's a young black kid, you wouldn't even get as far as asking these questions. It must be, we need to restrict immigration, and that's it. So I think there's a bit of a double standard here.
Oh, huge double standard. Like, and I completely agree with you. And that's what makes it so ironic, because they're the ones that will say the classic things, or like, oh, I don't see color, and don't play the race card, or rah, rah, rah. But like that the right claims to hate identity politics, but their
They're obsessed
reaction,
with it.
every reaction
That's all they
proves,
talk about is identity politics.
yeah, it proves that their entire worldview is identity politics. Like,
Oh,
you don't
yeah.
care about working class kids. You literally said this verbatim, that you don't care about working class kids unless you can weaponize them against minorities. And you don't care about knife crime unless you can use it to justify that more policing needs to happen in Black communities. Like, so they don't care about the social conditions that have created these atrocious things, that create violence, because they require them to hold people to account. And I don't think they like the word accountability. So yeah, I mean, Adolescence, their response to that, I think, exposes a lot, but actually this is a broader trend across so many different stories. Any story that comes out about someone who comes from a minoritized community is one that is weaponized to a certain
If you're watching and you might not consider yourself on the left, maybe you come to this channel and you're curious, I'll say to you, go watch left-wing content, left-wing streamers and news channels. Not news channels, we have no mainstream presence, but on YouTube. And then go watch GB News, go watch the right-wing corporate media, and compare and judge. See who talks more about identity politics and culture wars. You'd be very surprised, because they talk about it every single day. They'll find a new thing to be outraged about. Whereas, yes, of course, we talk about culture and social issues, but we also like to talk about class and economic issues, which is something the right does not want to talk about. So if you want to know who the real identitarians are, it's those guys. I absolutely love this conversation. Please go. Yes.
I'm so
please.
sorry. I cut you off. Like, can I just say one more thing?
Yeah, go for it.
I am really sick and tired of the word woke being thrown around at things that they just don't like. It's classic right-wing playbook. Like, one, I'm going to find a piece of media that challenges my worldview. My second step is I'm going to cry woke to discredit it. And then the third step that they always do is they're going to try and rally up as much disruption as possible, like rally up their base just so they can distract from real issues. I'm really sick and tired of hearing the word woke be thrown in my face as someone who's incredibly left-leaning, when we're actually just trying to highlight the structural issues that are impacting people that need to be, like, the ones that are silenced in society. Like, it honestly enrages me, and I feel myself getting quite hot just thinking about it, because I'm just like, you can't just scream woke every single time you don't like something. It's wild to me. Wild.
It's exactly what it is. It's anything they don't like, they call it woke. That's literally it. So, but yeah, I love this conversation. I can talk about this for hours with you, but we're going to have to move on because we've got another 2 stories to get through. So we're going to move on to our second story of the evening. Landlords have overrun the economy. You'd be forgiven if you believe that the most common type of business would be goods that are being produced or services such as hospitality. Well, no, it's buy-to-let landlords. Reporting for Novara Media, Harriet Williamson said this. According to research by real estate company Hamptons, the most common type of firm registered in the UK is now buy-to-let businesses. The number of companies holding buy-to-let property in the UK rose from 92,975 in 2016 to 401,744 in February of 2025. In 2024 alone, a record 61,570 new limited companies were set up, a 23% increase on 2023, which previously held the record. In fact, there are now nearly 4 times as many buy-to-let businesses registered with Companies House as there are takeaways or hairdressers. She continued on by saying how this has basically coincided with a mass tax avoidance scheme. The explosion in buy-to-let firms over the past 9 years dovetails perfectly with a gradual withdrawal since 2017 of income tax relief individual landlords used to employ on residential property finance costs. These changes didn't affect UK and non-UK registered companies, so landlords appear to have moved their portfolios en masse from their personal names to limited companies. I mean, that figure in the first paragraph where buy-to-let companies increased from 92,000 to 400,000 in the space of 9 years is insane. It's insane. Productivity in this country is low. And in a recent leaked document, Google co-founder Sergey Barin described a 60-hour work week as the sweet spot to boost productivity. Sarah, we got rich people telling people work harder, when in reality the problem is our economy is relying on landlordism.
Yeah. Honestly, again, another topic. Honestly, the topics you've got today are just going to get me super hot just thinking about it, because everyone knows how I feel about landlords. Economic deadweight. I say it all the time. Get rid of them. Abolish them. They are like a parasite in our society. And our economy isn't broken because we're not working hard enough. It's broken because a system's been built where hoarding assets is more profitable than actually producing anything of value. And that's what the landlords know that. They're not innovators. They're literally, I'm going to be so harsh here, they're economic parasites. I'm sorry to anyone who is a landlord or knows someone who's a landlord. That is just my personal opinion. I believe landlords are economic parasites. They extract wealth from people's basic need for shelter whilst contributing nothing in return. What are you actually putting into society? And like, those figures are atrocious. The fact that the buy-to-let businesses have surged that significantly, I think shows that businesses, sorry, I got distracted. Businesses are not to create goods, but essentially not even to provide services, but essentially to take from those that are working incredibly hard in society. Wages are stagnating. Home ownership is becoming almost impossible to get. And then, I don't know. I feel like society is just depleting significantly. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about this, the entire economy it's almost false in a way, right? You've got basically commercial landlordism, which is now the biggest type of company, which doesn't add any social value or any kind of value, really. And then you've got essentially this rentier economy as well, which isn't just of landlordism, it's everything. Think about streaming services, right? They don't want you to own anything now. They can give it to you, they can take it away. And then couple with that with the fact that when people look at countries and they say, but they're growing really, really fast, the problem is, though, a lot of that growth is through debt, consumer debt. So, of course, if you're in debt, okay, that's not good for you, but on the books, that looks really, really good. So this is the sort of economy we are stumbling towards. A low productive economy, which has nothing to do, by the way, with hours worked. In fact, there's evidence out there to show that actually if you reduce the hours, productivity goes up. Because guess what? Human beings are not robots. We need to have a rest. We need to, have a rest, take some time off, and then come back to work. Trying to squeeze more and more out of people will not work. So we have this, and then of course when it comes to debts, people aren't participating in the economy in a meaningful way. A lot of our debt is not even going on luxury things, it's going on rent, it's going on food. And I even saw it today, actually, and you might have seen it, wild stuff. DoorDash and another company, they're looking at maybe now doing takeaways and food on Klarna or some kind of payment thing. It just shows you just like this is such a dystopian economy. And then you've got people going on the Diary of a CEO podcast saying, well, the problem is people need more entrepreneurial spirit. Sorry. And it's really insane how we're missing this glaring hole of this bullshit economy. And of course, landlords, they're fucking leeches.
They are leeches. It's true. And this isn't this isn't capitalism functioning properly. Anyone who wants to be like a huge, capitalism fan, like it's just a parasitic model where the housing market has been turned into this giant cash cow, where for landlords and investors alike, like while the rest of us get priced out of ever owning a home and then dealing with landlords who are raising those rents. And it hasn't happened accidentally. It's as a result of deliberate policy decisions, because the government could have shut this down years ago, but they haven't. The Tories literally phased out mortgage interest tax relief in 2017, but they didn't close the loophole for corporate landlords. So what did they end up doing? They end up building these portfolios into company structures essentially, and they kept dodging tax. So with the figures that you've just shown, looking at that increase, it's not entrepreneurship, it's just legalized looting essentially. So yeah, real world impact.
That's a very good way of putting it. Legalized looting. because that's what it is. And the idea, you know, people say to go out and work to produce some kind of value to society. And that, I mean, look, this is the natural endpoint of capitalism. And I know you're not saying that, because also a lot of people could say, oh, no, it's corporatism. It's not capitalism. Yeah. This is the natural endpoint. But if we were just to have a sort of discussion within the capitalist frame, right? I'm not arguing as a socialist. I'm arguing as a social democrat. The capitalism that you guys say that you want isn't providing. It's not going out there producing something and then the market basically self-regulates in a way that's beneficial for society. That's the theory, but of course it's just a theory. But in reality, without some kind of regulation or going even further and having some sort of democratization of the workplace and the economy, you're going to get not just gross levels of inequality, but the type of wealth that's being produced is basically sucking it out of renting. The economy essentially is being rented to us, and we own nothing, which is so funny because a lot of the people who talk about WEF, the World Economic Forum, they're secret communists, you own nothing. And it's like, well, WEF is just a capitalist sort of little circle jerk thing to say, pat themselves on the back, like, oh, we as capitalists can solve the world issues. You know, you ignore them. But yeah, you won't own anything, and that's under capitalism.
Yeah, agreed. And where do we actually go from here? Because when you've got someone like Bryn telling us, to work 60 hours a week to boost productivity, like productivity for who? Like the average person in this country is already working harder than ever. But where does that wealth go? Would it go straight into the pockets of people who are taking it from us? Landlords who do nothing but siphon off wages from working people. I think if we genuinely want a productive economy, and I think they do, maybe somewhere deep within they do, we need to stop rewarding those who extract wealth and start supporting those who actually create it. So that means, you know, serious rent controls to stop landlords from price gouging tenants. I mean, in an ideal world, completely abolishing landlords, but I don't know if that's realistic. And investing.
We can always push it, can't we?
Investing in
reach for the stars.
Reach for the stars.
You're being aspirational. That's what
I know.
Want, right? We're aspiring to get rid of landlords.
We are. I think that's the ideal solution. But closing these stupid tax loopholes so landlords don't get away with dodging their fair share, and a shift away from housing as a speculative asset. So homes are actually treated as places to live, not just investment vehicles for the rich. That's what's pissing me off. The fact that they see it as this asset to extract money from. Like, everyone has a right to shelter, and here you are driving people out of it. Fucking hell, it's awful. It
is fucking awful, isn't it? I think we're going to move on. But before we go on to our next story, I just want to say, if you are enjoying our show, please like and hit that subscribe button. Once the show is finished, come back and leave a comment because it helps with the algorithm, and we're going to go through them anyway and read them. Remember, we are just a group of volunteers who are trying to turn this into a full-time media organisation where this becomes our full-time jobs. So if you'd like to support us, then you can go to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support. There you can sign up to our Patreon and support us for as little as £3 per month. You can also give us a one-off donation through our website too. Alternatively, you can become a member on YouTube for just 99p. Now, we will be right back after this video.
The more we know, the less likely we are to tolerate tyranny. The far right knows this. That's why they spend so much time trying to control the media and how we connect with one another. So we're asking for your help. From fascists in the streets to heads of state, the far right is getting organized across borders.
Podríamos llamarnos una internacional derechista.
Fueled by the super rich, it's not just money that they're burning.
We are going through something in the scale of industrial revolution. The world order is changing.
We are living in a time where extremisms are being fanned.
Elon Musk, everybody knows that he's a problem.
So what can we do about it? From the climate catastrophe to economic misery, we know that the solutions to the many crises we face today will come from dialogue and decency, not more walls and weapons. For over 50 years, New Internationalist has been at the forefront of independent media for social change and global justice.
The New Internationalist comes from a tradition of trying to impose a little bit of humane thinking on the world, to be part of a conversation, to prevent, absolute moral relativism and cynicism.
We know that our readers take action, whether it's joining protests, signing petitions, donating to causes, or making changes in their personal lives. But radical, independent media like ours costs money, and that's why we need your support. Your donation will directly fund our reporting into the rise of the global far right and the social movements working towards real change. It will help our network of journalists bring you fresh perspectives that the mainstream media sidesteps.
I think that the genocide in Gaza has really laid bare the inherent racism in the Western mainstream media.
And the tools to change the world for the better.
At the end of the day, there is actually human cost to this, and we have to remember that.
We have no billionaire backers, no media moguls, and no corporate ads. As one of the world's biggest media cooperatives, we're proud to be co-owned by our readers. We know that if we work together, a better world is possible.
The only way today to beat fascism globally is a global solidarity.
Help rewire the world. Fund journalism that sparks change.
Now, if you're wondering why we're running ads on other organizations, it's because we want to build solidarity and unity. And we're going to be showing other ads in the future from other left-wing organizations. No money has been exchanged in this. This is all about trying to build a sort of a cohesive media movement, because at Turn Left, we've always believed from its inception that we need a leftist ecosystem to take on the establishment and the right-wing capture of the media. That was the New Internationalists. Please do check them out. But we are going to go on to our final story of the evening. Gary Stevenson has continued to make the media rounds, calling for higher taxes on the wealthy and explaining to the world that inequality is destroying society. Now, he appeared on the Diary of a CEO podcast and debated entrepreneur Daniel Priestley. Let's take a look.
Listen, I won every maths competition I've ever been in, you know what I mean, since I was a little kid. I didn't even have a desk in my house, you know. I was one of the top students at LSE, and I still had to win my job by cheating in the card game. You know, that's the world that we live in. I don't think that's a very replicable strategy. And look, it's very easy for people like us who've made money to say, oh, we did it, aren't we great? Go out and, you know, you've said that you think if young people go and work in tech business, they can get financial security. If it was that easy, they'd all be doing it. You know, they're not idiots. Our viewers are not idiots. They're trying. They're trying. They want to find the good opportunities, and they work. Listen, they're
I'm
working
not the one
so
saying
hard.
they're idiots. You're the one who says that they can't do it anymore. I see people do it all the time. Like, I'm working in entrepreneur.
People from poor backgrounds. But then why are our viewers? You think all of our? If it was that easy, why is everybody not doing it?
I'll tell you why people aren't doing it. We went through a schooling system that taught us how to get an office job.
Okay.
Right. We went through a schooling system to prepare us for a world that doesn't really exist anymore, which is the Industrial Revolution world.
I mean, I thought it was a masterclass because he just cuts through all the bullshit. I mean, there is an endless stream of entrepreneurial slop content on social media. It's the same old thing. Work those extra hours. Get up at 4:30 in the morning. Start a business. Take risks. But I think this next clip really, really hits home.
The power of entrepreneurship is that starting with nothing, you can actually make improvements. I'm not saying everyone ends up as a millionaire, and I'm not saying everyone ends up equal, but I'm saying you can make improvements in your life. And the thing that causes mental health issues is the feeling of having no agency or no control over your circumstances until the world changes the whole economic system.
I never told people don't work hard. I never once said that. Never once said that.
You said if your dad wasn't rich, you'll never be rich.
Which is true in 99.9% of cases. I've never told people don't work hard.
That's actually not true in 99% of cases.
I've never told people don't work hard, okay? And listen, if you think that Ugandans should be more entrepreneurial, I've never been to Uganda, maybe that's the problem out there. Maybe that's the problem in Nigeria. Maybe that's the problem in India. Listen, I've never said don't work hard, okay? When I brought my book out last year, the hardback, I was at some event and I come out, I was drinking in London Bridge. And I come out late, it was like 1 a.m. And some guy come up to me when I was unlocking my bike. Some guy from Newcastle, which is the northeast of England. It's this quite poor town. There's a lot of working class people there. And he said, I've been watching you on YouTube and I love your stuff. And this guy started crying. This guy started crying on the street, right, in front of me. He's like, I work so hard, Gary. I work 2 jobs. My mum's sick and I'm trying to help, I'm trying to support, and I don't understand why. And I'm sorry that I'm crying, but nobody ever told me that it wasn't my fault before. That's what he said to me, okay? And listen, I believe 100% aspiration, ambition, entrepreneurial spirit. I would never see a kid that has that and say, turn it off, okay? But the flip side of if you just work hard enough, you can make it, is if you didn't make it, it's because you didn't work hard enough and it's your fault. And I would like you to sit and think very hard before you send that message to young men and young women in our society.
I mean, that is such a powerful clip. I mean, I really like how he flips the argument on its head, saying that ignoring the systemic problems and basically it's all down to personal responsibility, that is actually extremely harmful, and it probably doesn't make people more entrepreneurial. Sarah, I think this debate, I think it really, really gets to the heart of the issue of our economy and the current system we all live in, which is essentially rigged economy versus personal responsibility. What do you make of Gary's arguments and also the way he explains it too?
Yeah, he's brilliant. He's excellent. Like, I've been following him for a while and I don't have bad things to say about Gary. So I hope he doesn't disappoint me going forward, because I always get my hopes up with some people. But he seems really genuine, actually, because what he's actually he's exposing this myth of risk and hard work that I think one of the most insidious myths that we are exposed to as working people from people like Daniel Priestley is that billionaires kind of earned their money by taking risks, but what risks did they actually take? And Gary's actually exposing that a landlord doesn't really risk anything. They profit off the fact that someone else has to pay them rent to keep a roof over their heads. A hedge fund manager doesn't risk anything. They didn't create anything. They just shuffle money around and extract value from businesses that other people actually work in. So the real risk is actually on the workers who lose their jobs when companies are restructured for profit. The real risk is on tenants choosing between rent and food. And Gary's really, really exposing that. So the fact that he's laying out that wealth inequality isn't an accident, it's the foundation of our economy, is a fundamental truth. So yeah, I completely support what he's saying. But we need to stop acting as if billionaires and landlords have legitimate claims to their wealth. They don't. I put landlords in that category as well because I can't stand them and they need to be in this conversation.
Good. Now, look, no one on the left tells people, sit at home and give up. Now, I think people should reach for the stars, work hard, make something of themselves. But look, we'd be lying if we didn't tell people that the economy is rigged against the working class. And I do think that ties into our last story, where the most common type of business is landlordism. And to be a landlord, you often have to have a lot of capital to start off with. It's a very nepotistic business. And as time goes on, we're creating less social value. It's all about the rentier economy. How can you expect more people to be entrepreneurs? I mean, all you're asking is for more people to become leeches on society, which is exactly what landlordism is, isn't it?
Yeah, completely agree. But that's the frustrating thing. Like, even let's talk about this debate in that question as well, because even with what was going on in that debate, and maybe this is going to be a slight criticism of Gary Stevenson, but it kind of ties into what you were talking about as well, that I still feel like he plays by their rules, because I think a lot of people are still trapped in that neoliberal mindset, right, where how can we actually just make capitalism work better, rather than why are we actually tolerating a system that prioritizes wealth hoarding over human need? With landlordism, it is an accurate example of people hoarding wealth over the basic need for shelter. And even Gary, as sharp as he is, frames some of his arguments in a way that still assumes productivity and economic contribution are the main ways we should measure value. And I don't think that that's the best way to measure value, because what if not everything should be about economic productivity? And I think of caregivers, organizers, artists, that the people whose work is essential to society as well, but doesn't generate profit. Even teachers, nurses, work that's fundamental and pivotal to society but doesn't generate profit. Capitalism forces everything to fit into that framework. And you were mentioning earlier, even just the framework around corporations and these big industries. I think we're constantly forced to justify why people deserve to live with dignity.
Absolutely. Yeah.
instead of
I mean,
demanding that dignity should be the baseline.
you've hit the nail on the head, because that debate is dripped in neoliberalism, right? And I think we both agree. Gary is brilliant. He's calling for good policies, a wealth tax,
Agreed.
more redistribution. He's sort of taken the line of saving capitalism, though, isn't he? Because as you said, the argument is still framed in a way that every single person must create some kind of productive or monetary value, and we need to be asking the question: why does everyone have to behave the same way? Some people, as you said, are creative. They work in the arts or maybe teaching, and it's not particularly profitable, but it does add social value in some other way. So even though we understand this debate is between essentially neoliberal free market economics and a more social democratic politics, we need to look at how we should shape the economy around different people's needs and desires, rather than trying to shape everyone into this sort of narrow box of essentially being a cog in a machine.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think everyone's like, oh, the system's rigged. The system's rigged. No, the system's not rigged. It's working exactly as
Yes,
it's
it's
intended. You know what I mean?
exactly,
Like,
yes.
this is how it's supposed to be built up. I think one of the biggest lies that we're constantly being fed is that, yeah, the economy's broken, the system's broken. No, I'm sorry, it's not. We don't need to tweak it. The system is actually functioning exactly as it's been designed to. It's a system that's actually built to funnel wealth upwards, whilst the rest of us are kind of left fighting for the scraps. And yeah, I'm kind of sick and tired of it, because landlordism is now the most common form of business essentially in the UK. I can't remember what the statistic is, but I think there are just too many landlords, basically. I can't remember the stat. So it's not because it's productive, but it's because it's the most efficient way for the ruling class to siphon wealth from working people without really lifting a finger. So it's never been about innovation. It's never been about, work harder. It's literally about controlling access to resources and making people pay for what should be basic rights: housing, healthcare, education, like all of these wonderful things that we should have access to that are, not accessible.
Yeah, and look, I really like Gary. Maybe he's not as radical as us socialists, but that's fine. I mean, I'm happy that we've got someone out there talking about it's okay, but I'm happy we've got someone, making the rounds talking about redistribution and wealth tax. So that's a positive step forward. But I think we're going to wrap up on the stories, and we're going to bring in our producer, go to some of our comments. Lewis is a little bit under the weather, so his voice is a little bit. Yeah,
just a little bit. Can you guys hear me all right? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, yeah, I apologize for my nasally tones. Hi, everyone. So yeah, it's been a great show so far. I thought I would work backwards on the comments this time to make it more relevant to the most recent chat. So we're going to start off with Vicky's last comment, where Vicky put, which poor people have the stability to risk it all on an entrepreneurial adventure? Who has the time? And this is so true as well, right? When you hear, I hate these stories about, like, you'll hear stories about, like, oh, Zuckerberg dropped out of Harvard to start Facebook, and Jeff Bezos started in his garage. When you actually look at those stories, the fact that he's already in Harvard anyway and came from a very successful middle class family. Yeah, and Jeff Bezos as well. Like he had massive support from his family when he was starting this thing off. And this is what frustrates me about these conversations so much. Thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. Like it kind of ties in with the hard work narrative, right? It's laughable. Like billionaires don't work harder. People who are rich don't work harder. It's just that the ones that are nurses, teachers, delivery drivers, factory workers, they just don't own capital, so their labor's undervalued. Whereas billionaires and people who are relatively rich sit back and collect wealth off their back. So the richest 1% in the UK, I think I just can't remember where I heard this. Might have been in this show. I can't remember. I literally just heard it now. I don't know where I got it from. That the richest 1% own more than 70% of the wealth in the UK, and yet they're kind of still being told that this is about individual effort, and it's not. So
well, I mean, the stories though that they'll pluck. Okay, you've given Mark Zuckerberg, because obviously that's like, it's not a real story, because the fact that you go to Harvard, you're in a privileged position, right? But there are stories out there, people living in poverty and they're eating out of the bin. Manny Pacquiao was selling stolen cigarettes in the Philippines, and now he's one of the greatest boxers of all time, and he's multi-millionaire. But there's a reason why these stories are so famous, because they're so far and few between. It's not like you got loads of these kind of stories. They're a handful, because they are the exception, not the rule.
And also, as well, it's really important not to focus on entrepreneurs when it comes to this. I know that's about the conversation, but when we're talking about jobs in society, right, which are seen as successful, if we take something like doctors, right, I think the last time I checked the data in the UK, it's something between like 90 and 95% of doctors in the UK come from middle class backgrounds, and there are reasons behind that. So sometimes it's about even getting away from these billionaires and just looking at the quote unquote like everyday jobs which are seen in society as successful. And it's the same in like the financial sector. All these like very cliche fancy jobs, finance, lawyers, bankers, it's all mostly 80 to 90% middle class people. Similar on the topic, Edward. Gary has a vital point. It's very easy to make it if you already have generational capital and social capital too. You need to look and talk in a certain way. You need to go to the right.
Yeah.
And this is so true as well. There are people who are held back just simply because of like their accents as well. When we're talking about looking and talking in a certain way, and people are massively judged on that. You can be an exception and be a working class kid from Birmingham or Liverpool or something like that. But once you might make it into King's College London or Oxford, and I've heard people talk about this. They just don't fit in. People don't want to be friends with them. People do kind of marginalize them because they are different and they're from different backgrounds. There's so many things stopping people from being successful.
There's a lot of superficial reasons why I might hire someone. Like I've always said to like cynically use what you've got in a way. So if you're in an interview, right, and you're with somebody else and you've got exact same experience and qualifications, that person needs to pick someone. Honestly, they could pick you based on they preferred what you're wearing that day. Like it's mad, and people need to understand that these sort of social interactions happen. Sometimes they're probably inevitable, right? But that happens. So to then try and turn around and say there's only one key factor, and it's basically working hard or being smart enough to be wealthy, when there's so many decisions that are completely out of your control, where you're from, where you start in life, what you look like, what you sound like, what you're wearing. I mean, I guess that is in your control, but obviously, like, people can't afford to buy loads of clothes or the latest thing or the smartest thing, whatever. There are so many different factors at play which they just want to completely ignore. They want to oversimplify the economy. It's like a childhood's tale. I think, believing that you live in a meritocracy is the same logic to me as believing in Santa when you're an adult.
Yeah, I ended up in the, was it the Cambridge or Oxford club? I can't remember. So very fancy universities, if anybody doesn't know, they have these clubs that you can join after you leave university, and you pay like $4 or $5 a year, and they have like a few locations around the UK. And my friend's friend got me in last year. And when people were talking to me, they'd be immediately like, "What college did you go to?" And I'd be like, "Oh, I didn't go to Oxford or Cambridge." And they'd be like, "Oh, what university did you go to?" I didn't go to university. They didn't know what else to say to me. That happened 7 or 8 times that night. Nobody knew how to continue a conversation with me because I didn't go to a university or an elite university. Like, that's what happens in these spaces. I will move on to Katie's comment. Completely different topic. Katie said, rejoice, turn left, comrades. But Katie's currently laying in a hospital bed and waiting to get move upstairs. So I wanted to send some love to Katie and make sure that she is okay.
Everyone in the chat, please send love to Katie. And I hope you have a speedy recovery.
Hope you're okay.
And moving on to good old Zeke. Housing should not be for profit. Someone else's words. And I agree.
Yeah.
It should be not for profit, but also we should, in the future, acquiesce all housing, and it's actually given for free. We should have universal basic services, and I think free internet, free food, free transport, free housing. That's the socialist utopia I want to live in.
So yeah, when I read that story a few days ago, because I think it was me who sent it to you, I remember reading another part of it, and there is like a bit more nuance to it. Like, it's not a case of like it's just massively increased by that amount. It has massively increased, but it's not necessarily gone from 97,000 to like 400,000 simply because that's the how good the market is right now for rich people. It's because a tax law was also changed, so people had to take like a person like that they could personally own it, and the tax law changed, and it was easier for people to run a business. But what I like about that change is that it truly shows you how much of a business it actually is.
Yeah, it's more about, rather than the growth, I think it's a bit of both. It's the growth, but also exposing what was already there.
Yeah,
and of course, a lot of people just changed their registration because of the tax. It doesn't really matter whether it's grown or not. We now know that 400,000 of them are buy-to-let. And we know that this economy is now built on creating no social value, creating no produce, or even a service. Because a lot of landlords like to say, well, we provide a service. It's not really a service, because usually if there's a service, you've hired a property manager. Now, of course, a property manager is a job. If they come around and sort things out for you, I still think that's some kind of service. But the landlord often doesn't do it. He just hires it out to someone else. So they're not really doing the service.
I got into a debate with somebody like a couple of months ago, and they were saying, well, you know what? There's lots of like cheap housing in certain parts of the UK. You can go to small towns in Midlands and get a 3-bedroom house for less than 200k. Were you there, Sarah? I said, yeah, but
why do we have to move?
Exactly. And I was like, well, me and my partner, his career is in London. It only exists in London. So we can't just move to some random town in the Midlands. And then he was like, oh God, these young people not willing to make sacrifices. And I'm like, do you want my partner to downskill in the economy? Like, that's not helpful to the economy either.
That's the thing. Like, and also, why the fuck should people sacrifice? If you live in this place, say you live in London, you love London, you have a job there, have a good wage there. Why the fuck should you have to move because some other leech has decided to jack up people's rents?
Wait, so do landlords?
Why should you have to do that anyway? That's not a functioning society where you have to up and move your entire life because someone else has fucked you over. And also, on that point, right? That's where you get gentrification, by the way. These people, gentrification is bad, but it doesn't last forever because guess what? These cheap places where housing's cheap, you're going to get some scummy landlords and buy low, rent high. And that is a specific reference to a particular person, Samuel Leeds. I debated him last year. He's the guy who he changed his company name because he probably had to, but it was literally called Buy Low, Rent High. He used to make TikTok saying, I've come into the Northeast and I've bought this housing. It is so cheap and I'm now renting it for really high. And people in the local area couldn't afford it. So this not only is that guy telling you, oh, go and gentrify that area, but also in 10 years' time, that's going to be bought up by a big landlord. And where are you going to go?
Do you remember that screenshot that I sent you? I think it was you a few weeks ago, because obviously you live in Leeds and I'm from Leeds.
Yeah.
Where I sent you a screenshot of an apartment that was for sale in Leeds, and it was advertised as landlords, basically like investment only. And then in brackets it said, "Oh, you can." What was the expression they used? It was like you can just buy it and lock it up, meaning just if you've got enough money
for a future investment. Yeah.
Yeah, so you could just buy the property and just never use it and just live off of the amount of money that's going to be made.
So disgusting, isn't it?
It's
absolutely
how they were advertising this flat.
Sorry.
I can't remember. No, I can't remember how it was phrased. That's all. But yeah, like I've seen this before.
Is that what they're brandishing? Is that what they're actually calling entrepreneurship? Is that not just feudalism? Like I'm really confused.
Literally, it is. That's why we are transitioning, and I can't wait to read Yanis Varoufakis's book Techno-Feudalism, which he's basically saying that like we're not completely out of capitalism, but there's signifiers saying that we're moving beyond capitalism to a sort of techno-feudal state, which is so true because it's now not even capitalism. It's basically everything is being rented back to us, but through tech bros. Really, really like dystopian shit. And it is socialism or barbarism.
We don't own anything anymore. We don't own our movies. We don't own our music.
Exactly.
We don't own anything anymore.
No. I do like though that people who like with like Blu-rays and stuff that they buy. Sorry, my mic is caught. Where they go out their way to buy Blu-rays and say like I like owning these things, and they should, because like it's crazy that you can spend so much money on Netflix. Actually, look, I was doing a James Bond marathon at the end of last year, and I got up to Quantum of Solace. Quantum of Solace, right? And then suddenly Amazon turned around and went, "Oh, actually, you can't watch the films on Prime. You have to pay for it now." I was like, I literally got nearly to the end. And they said, no, all the James Bond films, because it's coming up to Christmas, they feel like, 007 sales might increase. So if you had an Amazon Prime subscription, all the Bond movies were there for you to watch, stream for free. I was doing the marathon, and got to near the end, like 4 away from the last one. And then suddenly you have to pay for all of them. Like, You're never anything.
What a scam.
Which
What
obviously
a
I didn't do.
scam.
I
Like,
just decided not to watch the rest of them.
no, but it's true. Like even with sorry, this is such a digression. But even with Severance, they were like, watch the first episode free, and then they like buy the rest, and I'm like, oh for God's sake! Like they're like, you need to pay for an Apple TV subscription now, and it's just it's too much. Yeah, we don't own anything.
Well, do you want to know what the biggest scam is before I move on to my next comment? Did you know that car companies are now selling cars that have features in them that are locked, and then you have to pay more to get the feature that is already in your car? Tesla does this. BMW do this with some of their newer models as well. You can buy this thing in like the States, which is like a boost to your engine or something like that. But basically, like it's basically the equivalent of you buying a 3-bedroom house, but you're only allowed access to 2 bedrooms unless you pay for the 3rd bedroom. That's already built inside of the house.
What that does, it's quite literally on purpose giving you less, so then at a later date you buy more. That's where, and that's the thing when I talk about growth, right? That model, right, on paper, that'll look like the economy is growing because, oh my God, like look at the extra revenue companies are making, and then but you put it on paper because GDP is not a very good signifier in terms of the health of the economy. It's literally just the total amount of like, it's basically just one big figure. And that sort of thing will drive up growth. But then if the growth comes from, well, basically you already own this thing and we're going to charge you more to get into it. Like, what is that growth? Who does that serve?
Yeah, I don't know.
Apart from the billionaire class.
I don't know how it's measured nowadays, but like to take something like the Adobe package, which I know you use, I use, years ago, you could just buy the Adobe package. That's one transaction within the economy. But now you pay a monthly fee. So is that adding more to the, the fakeness of GDP growth by them charging you 12 times a year instead of a one-off payment for however many years?
It will, because a lot of the time, if it's they wouldn't have just changed it to monthly, they would have also increased the costs, right?
Yeah.
So if the total number is more, yeah, technically that's growth. But that's why I hate the framing of GDP. Even the person who coins the term GDP back in those days, it was measured during World War II, even said it's not a very good thing to do as a general consensus for how well the economy is doing. But all our politicians, all the media just talk about growth. That's it. It's crazy.
Right, we've got loads more comments to get through, so I'm going to put up another one from a really wise guy called Lewis Aaron.
Oh, who's that?
So he was the presenter, wasn't he?
Yeah,
Yeah.
So let's not forget that Patrick Christie is part of the right-wing young male pipeline that are radicalizing people as well. If you go on his ex Twitter account, it's just crazy. I clicked on it earlier when you guys started talking about him, and one of the first accounts that he follows is like the Islamic takeover. And then the other people, I tried to see if he's interacted with Andrew Tate, but I couldn't find anything. But he's within that same sphere of right-wing pipeline, and there are multiple entry points part of it, and he is part of it too. So. That's why probably people like Patrick Christie is against it. But yeah, no, most of these topics are based on the first story, because a lot of people had a lot of interest in it. So Akala, Young's NZ, New Zealand. Akala's right.
Young Sins.
Sorry, I'm so
Sins. Sins. SINS, but spelled differently. You need to get down with the kids, Lewis.
Come on.
Come on.
Yeah, but nobody says down with the kids, so you're not down with the kids. That's right. After studying Glasgow knife crime, young men were denied masculinity through lack of economic opportunity, hard graft, and were pushed to gain masculinity through violent gang crime. Yeah, this is absolutely true. And like as a man myself, as a gay man, you do reflect on the idea that masculinity does push you in certain ways, especially as a young person, especially as a gay person. You want to conform even more and more and more because you don't want to be seen as the outlier, seen as weak than a man. And in different people, it does different reactions. And obviously, to enough people, it does push them down this, like whether it's gang crime or other types of crime or any other type of thing, which is just not a net positive for society, and obviously very bad for themselves and their family. It's a very layered issue.
I think there's absolutely room. I like positive masculinity is a really good thing, but unfortunately, what's happened now is we've got two framings, which is femininity and then toxic masculinity. It's not femininity and masculinity. It's femininity and then the extreme toxic masculinity. And I think when we call out toxic masculinity, a lot of your average Joes are like, oh, you want me to be feminine? It's like, no, you could be masculine. And look at Hassan Piker, for example, right? But you're just positive. Like, I kind of like this point where he says, like, through hard graft and through economic opportunity. All right. I know, I mean, when I was younger, when I actually could, get off the sofa and not breathe heavily, I used to do boxing. And I know that there's a lot of kids in my club who were definitely struggling, but they found boxing as an incredible avenue because boxing specifically teaches discipline, right? And actually through that avenue, a lot of these kids otherwise definitely would have turned to like Andrew Tate. But through discipline, graft, and pride as well, absolutely, it makes a difference. So the problem isn't masculinity. The problem is extreme toxic masculinity, but it is the Andrew Tates of the world that says, this is the only form of masculinity, me. And if you don't subscribe to it, then you're just very feminine and you hate men.
Yeah.
And it's a very harmful thing to say.
When can we go back to the time when, like, the leaders in the world were like poets, architects, writers, and then they wore like crazy eccentric outfits, and they were artists in the spare time and like did gardening, and then casually wrote like a paper on physics. Like, this is what people used to be like. And obviously, I'm not going to like bring these people up as like good people because they were literally slave owners. But when you look into the history of like the Americas and the founding fathers, go and look what they used to look like, and each one of them had 5 different specialties. Like half of them were like poets and writers and musicians and all these types of things. Like that was the peak of masculinity a few hundred years ago, and now look where it's at.
I think that's you can definitely see how that is like capitalism and neoliberalism is affected that now, because obviously under neoliberal capitalism, those areas in life are not seen as valuable. So I think like that's why you can definitely trace capitalism and toxic masculinity, because being a poet, being an artist back in those days was far more respected in a way, right? But obviously as we move to a more society based purely on profit, I think it's weaned out these other areas and said, no, the only way to be masculine now is through business, is through entrepreneurship, because that's how you provide for your family. And actually we've kind of like the way how pink used to be a man color, right? And now it's blue or whatever, right? These social norms, they've changed, and that's also changed with masculinity. But I do think that is an effect of capitalism.
Agreed.
That's pretty what's the word, like black pilled? Is that the term you call it? I don't know.
Yeah, black pill's like the step beyond red pill, isn't it? Like,
oh no, that's not. No, just terminally online Tate. I don't know.
Yeah, Tate. I mean, the likes of Tate and these people that have these scam-driven business models that show you how to be a man. They're just symptoms of a larger issue, aren't they? Like, I don't see them as the root causes of misogyny or neoliberal individualism or hypermasculinity. Like, they are just symptoms of wider issues. And, we've got 69% of boys there was a study that was put out really recently, and I just need to find out who it was, but 69% of boys have encountered posts that promote misogyny online. It's just radicalization online is now becoming so much more prevalent, and I think we need to de-weaponize online hate and empower boys to help change the narrative. I don't think we're involving boys enough in the conversations. I'm finding that it is still, and maybe I'm wrong, people can say that I'm wrong, I don't mind. I still find it's women that are leading these conversations more than it's men. So yeah, kind of hoping that will change slightly going forward. Online misogyny is not going to go anywhere. It's rapidly increasing. Hypermasculinity, this need to be hypermasculine, is not going anywhere either. So yeah.
So I brought up this next comment from Tim because I think it's a really interesting, important topic about white collar crime is a different category of violent, is a different category from violent crime, which also is actually quite annoying in many different ways, because white collar crime can be incredibly violent in so many different ways. Because when you get, if we think about some of the biggest scandals that we're all very familiar with in the UK, whether it's the post office scandal, whether it's the blood scandal, everything from the Hillsborough scandal to the banking collapse of 2008, all of these types of things, like those situations unalived countless people, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're
on YouTube, by the way. You can say killed.
Oh my god, did I just say unalived?
Yeah.
Oh my god,
you're so TikTok brain.
I spent so much time on TikTok. I said that in person the other day as well. But yeah, no. So with if we take something like the banking crisis, right? People didn't go to jail for that. Like people absolutely fucked up and absolutely has destroyed economies for generations, even to this day. We're almost 20 years in now, and we're still suffering from those consequences. Nobody went to jail for it. When it comes to the Iraq War, nobody went to jail for it. There are so many kind of like white collar adjacent crimes which people may get punished for them. If we even talk about Grenfell, right? Nobody's gone to jail for it. We know right now that these companies and people purposely used insulation and the wrong equipment to construct these buildings, which obviously killed people in Grenfell, has the potential to kill other people. There are still thousands of buildings in the UK with this insulation. Nobody's in jail. Nobody's in jail.
People need like visual storytelling, right? And I think that's where, and we all kind of fall into this trap, but one kind of violence is the thing that makes sense to us. If you kill someone with a weapon directly, that's violence. But obviously writing, who's the guy who was the CEO of United Healthcare or whatever it's called, the one who got Luigi Mangione.
I don't think anybody remembers his name.
He killed thousands of people through his pen, and obviously when Luigi Mangione killed him, a lot of people in the media anyway, were so shocked by the murder. He killed someone in cold blood. Brian Thompson killed someone in cold blood, and you think, and I guess that is a kind of a flaw from human beings. We're quite emotional, that we see things through visual storytelling that on the surface that is absolutely far more violent. What Luigi Mangione did is unthinkable. But if you stop and think and sort of zoom out, you realise who was actually more violent. It's the CEO trying to make profit. It's sending people to war. It's austerity, like George Osborne. George Osborne killed 330,000 people and the rest of his government. They did that without a single weapon apart from a pen. And it's very hard to push that narrative through because it's not a visual sort of storytelling thing, is it? It's not. It's picturing someone signing a document is boring to people, but it's equally as violent, if not more violent.
It's a really great point, actually. I think people undermine the violence that comes behind policies and legislations. Unless it directly impacts them or they face the brunt of it. Violence is not something, but this is also the same for like even with conversations around and it's different, but on the same scale as like abuse. People always assume that abuse is physical. We're like, no, it's also economic. It's honor based. It's verbal, like it's emotional, like, and that's the same with this sort of violence as well. It is also through policy and legislation.
Yeah, I came across this term that I never heard of before. People who know law might know what it is, but it's called oblique intent. And it basically is a term in criminality where somebody is taking an action which the direct result of that action wasn't their intent, but they know it would either probably or possibly happen. So, for example, we now know that by George Osborne doing what he did and cutting and doing austerity, that killed 300,000 people. So I could argue that even though the intent of what Rachel Reeves is doing isn't to kill people, she is very aware that austerity killed people. So therefore she could be guilty of an oblique intent to kill people because she's very aware that this will kill people. And yeah, it's something that's used in criminal law, and I didn't realize it was a thing. And I think it's a really interesting concept and term because some people will talk about, oh, it's all about intent. It's all about intent. Well, there's layers to intent. There's layers to what
you don't
you're
want to
aware
let
that
people
you're
get
doing.
off the hook when someone does institute social policy that does kill people and you've seen examples of it, and even if that wasn't your intent and you still did it, you shouldn't let these people off the hook.
The impact is harmful. Exactly. I think it's something I've said all the time. Like, your intentions might not be malicious, but they are definitely harmful. Your impact is harmful. So I think that needs to be recognized. Even when we see these welfare cuts, like, their intentions are definitely not innocent, but their impact is going to be absolutely harmful. So yeah.
So Specs Bean Farmer, cool name. GB News wants to play down the right-wing radicalization. That's how they get their new viewers. It's absolutely true. I wouldn't say they're like deep into the pipeline. I think they're a large entry point for a lot of people. And they're definitely a big part of it, because you'll see the personality of the hosts on TV, and even though Patrick Christie's is an absolute dog piece of shit, he's actually quite light compared to who he is online. So once you transfer your following to him online, you will be taken down that pipeline that he's
because
in.
even when he was talking about Adolescence, he prefaced it by saying, "I've seen every single episode. It is a brilliant TV show. It's a brilliant piece of artwork. Stephen Graham is fantastic." But, and people might go, oh, I guess he's kind of reasonable, because he's not shitting on it all. He's saying, oh, no, it's a fantastic show. But, and then sort of adds in his, I think, quite racist talking point, right? But yeah, then you go on Twitter and you see the insane remarks. But if you're someone who maybe watched GB News as an entry point and thought, okay, these hosts aren't too crazy, and then you follow them on Twitter and they say something crazy, unfortunately, a lot of the time, people don't go, oh, that person's crazy. They go, oh, this person says this. Maybe that is true. Really very strange thought patterns us human beings have.
So if anybody doesn't know what type of pipeline that I'm talking about, so I posted a video about Adolescence on Instagram the other day, and somebody replied called "The Only Punk in Shitsville" said, "Look at the state of England. We've been invaded and we're being destroyed. Politicians have basically encouraged it. The WEF pushed it, and our soulless governments are being paid. Give it a few years and the country will be bankrupt and white English people will be a minority." That is a person I can guarantee who follows Patrick Christie's on Twitter, because that is the type of shit that they push and talk about.
They need to take those fucking tinfoil hats off their heads. I'm sick and tired of hearing about WEF. Like, shut up. God, that's the same person that will talk about, Adolescence was woke. Like, I'm done. I can't. I get really triggered just with those sorts of comments.
Well, I mean, the right wing complain that there's too many black characters or black actors playing it. Oh, they focus the story on a white kid. Oh, they're suddenly complaining. It's never good enough for you, is it? Can't ever keep you happy.
Not happy.
So, Flow Snake, I thought they usually cried about white people being.
That's what you said.
Yeah.
So white people being underrepresented. Wow, right ring snowflakes are confusing. It's so true. Like in their world, they just want to watch shows like Mad Men and The Sopranos. Like that's the ideal world.
And
for them,
Mrs.
right?
Brown Boys, which is fucking shite.
Yeah, Gavin Stacey. I don't mind.
No, you know what? If we went back to the IRA days, they'd probably call Mrs. Brown Boy the IRA terrorist propaganda or something like that.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. I mean, like, if even shows like what is it? Fresh Prince of Bel-Air had some heavy social commentary about race, right? But because it's like nostalgic, and because I guess the culture wars weren't so in your face back then, people accepted it, right? If Prince of Bel-Air was shown today, like as a new thing, people would just call it woke, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that these right wingers who say, "Oh no, everything in the past was great," and they'll say, "No, I love these black shows. I love these black centered films and TV shows and artwork. I love that. It's just what they've done today. They've gone too far." But if you take these things that come from the 80s and 90s and put it in today, they'd be saying the exact same things.
Also, as well, most DEI, quote unquote, is like in TV shows, is not about them being inclusive and woke. It's literally about capitalism, because what they do is, like, when they take a TV show, like right now I'm watching The Wheel of Time. I'm a big fan of the books, right? Lots of characters who are obviously just basically mostly typically white in the books. There's like one famous character who's a really famous woman from India, and then there's a really famous character in the show who is like an Asian American, because what they do is they don't want to like, it's not about saying, oh, look how inclusive we are, we're getting all these different actors. It's about so they can appeal to each of those audiences, so they can get people to come and watch their show and make it more successful. It's
the free market, guys. It's the system we want.
Most corporations who do this type of, like, this type of thing, it's all about marketing and capitalism.
They do not give a fuck, do they? And the thing is, though, and we can prove that, because now, given that I feel like some of the consensus is shifting, and there's a lot more conservatism becoming mainstream, that you are seeing brands and you are seeing companies shift on it, because all they care about is how can you make profit. Target, right, doing LGBTQ flags. They didn't give a flying fuck about queer people, because a lot of their queer employees are probably paid shit. but they just want to virtue signal to make money. And then these dumb right-wingers are like, oh my God, they're so woke. And like, it's nothing to do with wokeness. It's just making money. It's literally the free market capitalism system that you like. They're just trying to do that.
Exactly. Really great points. So
I will bring up another comment. Yeah, you brought this up as well at some point, Curtis. I actually showed this comment while you were talking about it from Edward. A decade or so ago, these right-wingers demonized working class people as chavs and scroungers. Ash Sarkar made this point as well when she was talking about her book. She looked back at the same journalists who were making articles around that time, around that time of what's Owen Jones's book called? Is it just Chav?
It's called Chavs, the demonization of the working class.
Oh yeah, like that period, right? Where I grew up in that like noughties period, which was the complete demonization of the working class. Like every Channel 4 show benefits
Poverty
Britain,
porn, wasn't it?
Yeah, just complete poverty porn constantly, and that was the main attack point towards the like mid to end late of the Labour Party's tenureship in government. It was all about the complete demonization of the working class, and now these same people are writing articles and making videos years later saying they've all been left behind.
Well, I think as well because the right are clever because they're responding to the change in dynamics. It was trendy to be classist in the 90s, right?
Yeah.
Because in the 90s, despite obviously inequality still being pretty high, it was a far better economy than we had today. The economy was growing and there was a lot of investment. I think people also, obviously when Tony Blair proclaims that we're all middle class now, like they actually kind of ripped class consciousness away from the people. So then actually when people were classist, it was seen as a culture thing, a social thing, rather than actual class. And actually mainstream comedians who today I would say are probably more progressive, more left-leaning, the mainstream comedians back then were incredibly classist, even working class comedians themselves. You could get away with it. But nowadays, because things are so bad, because inequality has got so much worse and basically nothing works, in a way, class consciousness is kind of coming back. And the right can no longer weaponize class because they're going to go, but you're out of touch. So now they've flipped it on its head and they're saying, oh, we care about class, but it's the lefties who want to be racist against white people. We care about the white working class. And obviously they don't care. They still hold the same opinions when they were calling you chavs. They still think that they've just tailored their language. So that means they could be racist, divide and rule, and then continue their assault on the working class.
Exactly.
Yeah. If we never had an immigration issue in this country, Nigel Farage's tagline right now would, instead of being "Stop the boats," it'd be "Stop the scroungers," because that's who he would be demonizing right now.
Absolutely.
If we didn't have immigrants in this country or a very low population of them, that would be his target group.
Yep, 100%.
So true. Yeah, and this is the thing. I think suddenly, like you said, Curtis, we're hearing about the white working class and oppressed group. Like that, the real enemy isn't, these big organizations, these corporations, but it's woke elites who care too much about migrants and minorities, and it's pure divide and rule. And the chav bashing that happened in the 2000s and up until recently, it was always a class war. I think what we're seeing now isn't a contradiction. It's just the logical next step in the ruling class's long history of controlling working class narratives. So when the economy was growing, they could afford to sneer at the poor, but when things start falling apart, they need a new scapegoat. And I think that's why they've pivoted from chav jokes to white working class concern.
I'm just thinking about the comedy shows. Think about Little Britain, insanely classist, right? Because it was acceptable and popular to do that at the time. So yeah, it's the right wing playbook from time millennium. It's back to the days of essentially the formation of the American states, and they were going to Charleston and they were going to the villages there and they were breaking up black and white indentured servitudes and slaves because they wanted to do it on class lines because they didn't want an uprising. Essentially racism was invented, and it's just a big playbook they've always done.
Yeah, it's punchline to political tool. That's what it is. Honestly, the moral panic I think around the working class was so disgusting, and I think it's actually happening still at the moment. Oh, I think
sure. It's not like gone away, but it
hasn't. It's still happening because you're still seeing them gut social housing and cut welfare and justify economic policies that punish the poorest. Like it's still happening because if poor people were just reckless and irresponsible, then why should the state help them? I think that's what's driving it.
Yeah.
Well, we even had David Lammy, was it yesterday, saying, "Oh, when I was younger, somebody in my family was claiming benefits that they shouldn't have been having."
Snitch.
Yeah, a little snitch.
That
And
shows exactly who he is. He's such a piece of shit, spineless coward. He snitches on his own fucking family.
So weird. Like, I don't know. Something about him is just so weird. I can't get it. I said it the other day. I just can't get it out of my head. Where's the liberal outrage?
Yeah. Where's the liberal outrage?
Where's the liberal outrage?
You. Fuck you.
Anyway, that's it for the comments, guys. Thank you very much for all the comments, everyone.
Thank you so much, Lewis, for that. And thank you for all your comments. They were really, really good. This has been an excellent show, Sarah, I think.
I loved it. I love Friday.
I think we hit a lot of points. I mean, okay, it wasn't foreign policy tonight, but I think we had a really good discussion on class, on race, on social issues, incels. It's been a bloody good show for a Friday.
Some might say it was too woke, Curtis.
It was too woke. Of course, it was woke Friday. Right. We'll put your woke hats on. We're going to have a woke weekend.
No, it's been great. Thank you, Curtis.
But that is all we have time for. So I do want to thank our viewers who tuned in. Of course, I want to thank the amazing Sarah Delisle for joining me tonight. Remember to like this stream. And if you're not a subscriber, then hit that button because we are trying to reach 20,000. We are not far off, but I think 20,000 as a milestone would be incredible. I have a personal goal of reaching 30,000 subscribers by the end of the year. It's a tall order. But you know what? I think we can do it. We've got an amazing audience, amazing viewership, and I think it's possible. If you want to see us grow, then you can head over to turnfmedia.co.uk/support. There is a link to our Patreon where you can support us monthly for as little as £3 per month, or follow the other link to give us a one-time contribution, or alternatively, you can become a YouTube member for just 99p. I don't want... We've just got a little super chat come in. I just want to bring that up. Graham Turner, $4.99 super chat. Thank you so much. It's really, really appreciated. I hope you enjoyed the show. I think I'm glad that we've become more regular, and I think quite soon we can probably do Monday to Friday. That's definitely in the pipeline. But thank you, Graham, and thank you everyone who tuned in. I'm Curtis Daly, and I will see you next time.
Support independent media. Support social justice that's there on social media. Thank you. Turn left.